Hello and welcome to Leading for Business Excellence, one of the podcasts in PMI's series. I'm Rich Seddon. I'm managing partner of PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training organisation. In this podcast series, we interview great leaders about what excellence means to them. It's very much the personal perspective. There's no one prescription for this. So we take the conversations in any direction that they go in. And today I am delighted to be joined by Vince Desmond, CEO of CQI and IRCA. Vince, thanks so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to our conversation as we explore excellence from a quality perspective. And I've got a theory I'd like to explore later on about how excellence and quality are related and possibly confused with one another. Don't know, just a theory. So Vince, before we get into the detail, could you tell us a little bit about your organisation, the CQI, the Chartered Quality Institute?
Yeah, sure I can, Rich, and thanks very much for the invitation. So, the Chartered Quality Institute, we're a professional body for quality folks. We have 19,000 members in about 100 countries, and through our certified training system, we train about 70,000 people a year in about 120 countries. Interestingly, outside the UK, our next largest membership population is in Japan, believe it or not, which I think is very interesting. Yeah. So that's sort of what we do. We've been around for about 100 years. We celebrated our centenary in 2019. So I think it's quite an interesting history to track how organisations have managed quality since the end of the First World War. But we're a chartered organisation, and we've been given that charter by the UK government, and our purpose is to promote quality management for the benefit of society. That's why we exist.
Mm-hmm. And with ever rising customer expectations, it's my theory that the role of quality and the expectations of quality have never been higher. Is that something you're seeing? And would you kind of observe that in your community, in the professional work, and in the profession itself?
Yes, I think. My first response was it's always been thus. The importance of creating value for organizations and doing it effectively and efficiently, value for customers and doing it effectively and efficiently has always been there. I think, but what's happening in the external environment now means that the competitive pressures are there, but also the expectations of customers in terms of what they expect and how they expect to access it, and really what a quality product is these days and a quality organization is changing rapidly.
Yeah, and I sometimes describe it to some of our clients as the Amazonification of expectations, both in the business world and in the personal world. We expect a certain level of service. We expect a certain level of demand to be fulfilled in times and ways that previously were inconceivable. You're thinking about the models of how these things move along that expectation chain. So much of it is just expected, and the organizations need to pedal very, very hard in the background.
No, that's absolutely right.
So, Vince, thinking about your role as CEO of CQI, what was that journey, and how did you get to your current role?
Well, I suspect, like most people in quality, but not intentionally. Not intentionally. I was. My father was a production engineer. He was very much a things person. He was a production engineer in the 1970s when UK PLC was struggling competitively. Mm-hmm. And he would take me around the factory, but he was very much a things person, and I never really understood the people side of it. And I think I never really got on with my father from this point of view, because he was a things person and I was a more of a people and process person. Um, so he was terribly disappointed I didn't follow in his footsteps and become a production engineer. Um, and I think probably partly as a rebellion, I kicked off a very flawed career as a jazz musician for a while, till my bank manager said, "Right, that's it, Vince, time, time to do something else." And then I went into education and training, um, and worked for an organisation that had a variety of education centres around the world. Um, but I moved from the sort of the delivery and the academic side, if you like, through to management side, and that's when I got interested in educational quality, as it was like that. So, um, and I ended up writing the module on educational quality management for an Aston University course that was, I'm not sure it's still going. So that's how I got into it. So I think it was when I had the opportunity to join Chartered Quality Institute and bring that quality bit, because the education, of course, and development's a key part of what CQI does. It was a match made in heaven, and I've never spent so much time talking to engineers since I've joined. So my father would be deeply happy with that.
Cool. So, some of the leaders that I speak to of similar organisations through some of these podcasts, actually, kind of either profit for purpose or not for profit organisations, there's a different set of challenges when it comes to leading those organisations to a straightforward, I say straightforward, to a conventional commercial organisation. From a leadership perspective, what are your key learnings since you've been in this gig, and what's been your key to success so far?
um, well, I think first of all, I think that you have to recognise there are a lot of commonalities with commercial business. Um, both ways round. I mean, commercial businesses, there's a lot more talked around purpose and value in businesses, and we're all held to account when it comes to our, how we do things. I mean, look at what's happened to the CBI recently in the UK.
Mm.
So I think there are a lot of commonalities, actually, probably more commonalities than not, in my mind. Um, you have to operate a not-for-profit business as a business because you need to make the best use of your resources. So, I think my reflections on working for a not-for-profit, particularly a charity and particularly a professional association, is that the um, the real value is out in the community of people around that not that professional association. I mean, we've got 19,000 members. We've doubled our number of volunteers over the past few years to almost 400, because that's where the expertise is, that's where
Hmm.
the experience is, and that is where a lot of the hard yards are done. Um, and you're dealing with people who are doing this voluntarily, and you're dealing with people uh, who have to balance this with the rest of their work and their home life in an environment where skills are a massive shortage. Time is at a premium, and it's quite difficult for some people to get that time, free that time up from their employer to do this sort of work. So there's a big piece for me around leaning into that community,
Mm.
supporting that community, and making that community successful. And the purpose bit becomes very important, because people aren't going to volunteer or support a not-for-profit unless they see clarity of purpose and clarity of social value. So um, that, I think, is extremely important in always going back to that, and that's where we get the best bang for our volunteering buck, if you like, and impact, is
Mm.
when you've got people who really really on message and on purpose for making life better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that because you get people that are willing to volunteer are naturally passionate, aren't they? And they're
Yeah.
interested in the topic.
yeah,
And some of the challenges, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, is having a clear purpose. And I've heard that from several people through these
yeah.
podcasts, actually. Um, it's being clear on why the difference they can make and where it all joins up.
Mm,
That seems to be a recurring theme here. I recorded a podcast with Mark Beasley, the CEO of the Kennel Club, or the Royal Kennel Club, as they've just become in the past few weeks.
brilliant.
Um, and he said a similar thing in the charitable sector of animal welfare sector that he's worked, of mobilizing that power
Yeah,
comes from clarity of purpose as
yeah,
well. That's really interesting. It's a
yeah, yeah,
commonality I hadn't expected to see today.
yeah. And I think that translates over. I don't know what I mean, you guys do a lot of work in the commercial sector, but my sense is that it's working both ways now in terms of purpose for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think there's a real opportunity for organisations of all types to be harnessing this power.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think so we see it from an improvement perspective. One of the key challenges is people working with great intent on transformation projects and improvement projects, be it quality or whatever, or otherwise. And if there is no clear link to a strategic objective, then the sustainability of those improvements, or dare I say, transformation, becomes impossible.
Yeah,
And the sustainability just will not happen. And often that exposes, well, where is our strategy and where does this fit with our
yeah,
strategy? And
yeah.
poses all kinds of uncomfortable questions for the leadership team.
Well, I think this is, this. Was it Duran who said, the 21st century will be the century of quality, but my view is that the 21st century is one of trust and transformation. That's what it's about. So I think what our community has to offer, is strategy, if you like, the quality way, which is aligned and deployed and purposeful. And we have ways of doing that, or enabling and supporting that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's a really smooth link to one of the next questions I wanted to ask you about challenges facing the quality profession and the quality professional. Wait, what do you see right now in your, because you've got, as you mentioned, an international view of it, also a huge spread of
Mm,
sectors
mm.
that you guys work with. What are you seeing as the key challenges that are being faced?
Well, I think there's challenge and there's some real opportunity.
Okay.
I think quality management, and I think we have to make a difference between, you know, the, how you manage and improve quality to the quality of something, of an artifact like a product or a process.
Yep.
But it's not a constant or a consistent. I was lucky enough to be invited by the Saudi government as part of um, their Saudi strategy, and they've developed a national quality strategy, and they brought a whole group of people from around the world to you know to review and support this, but also asked us, you know, what's the plan where you are,
Yeah.
um, and um, and it was very interesting because in what you might call developed economies, we had a big focus on quality in the 80s after my father retired, um, and there was a big focus on that in terms of productivity and competitiveness and
Hmm.
standards and all that sort of good stuff. Um, but I think it's other things have come along, and there's a sort of there can be a feeling that we've nailed quality, we've done that, we've got the certificate. Now that's different in other countries. You've got the Made in China strategy, which is all about improving, the brand and quality of what's produced in China. Talked about the Saudis. So I think it's quite situational from a national perspective. When you reflect it back to UK strategy, if you like, an industrial strategy, and I'm never sure if that sits with the Treasury or the new Department of Trade and Industry. But there's a lot of talk about productivity and competitiveness. the need for R&D, investment, skills, capital, all those sorts of things. But I think there is there's still the missing link on process and some of the very basic ideas of doing work well, and doing it and improving it, that we're missing a trick on here. I think from the quality professionals perspective, I'm and the quality function perspective, I'm noticing a shift, a really positive shift, in this sort of trust and transformation context. Those organizations which get this idea of quality management and improvement are using and viewing their quality professional, their quality function, as an enabler. And I think that speaks to one of the problems, challenges, if you like, that have built up since the 1980s, where the quality professional, the quality function's been a doer, doing the management system, dealing with crises when they happen. But I think the opportunity now, especially given the pace of change, is around shifting left, so designing quality in the first place, and recognizing that quality is managed in the value chain. So the role of the quality professional is to enable competence, capability, and culture. So I'm very encouraged, especially by what they call these days the next generation of people coming into the profession, who see it very much as that, an enabling profession, and helping the value chain. So I think there is an opportunity for organizations to shift their mindset, and that needs to be supported by the function and the professional making that shift as well. Then I think there is this you look at the relentless amount of regulation coming in, so there's always going to be that compliance element, if you like, that the profession can support with. But as we get into the digital space, I think that's very, very interesting, because if you drill down from trust, it's about risk, and if you drill down from risk, it's about assurance and building quality in. And you've got all these new technologies that I think there's a real opportunity for the profession to help with, and on the transformation side of things as well, with the pace of change that's going on, as we spoke about earlier, moving that, doing strategy the quality way, so you've got that improvement and transformation aligned, and meaningful and consistent. I think they're two big opportunities for the profession. It really means stepping up. It means shifting left in the process, so you're helping the organization build quality in, stepping up so it's more strategic. And I suspect what it means, and this is what is emerging, is engaging with enabling different professional domains, because you've got all the technologists and data scientists. So understanding that language, understanding those technologies. And if you look at what's happening, since we first talked about this podcast, we've had the EU go the next stage on their AI regulation. The United States has done the same thing. We've had various letters from people saying, "Oh dear, be wary of AI."
Yeah.
The ISO has made some good progress in developing a standard for assuring AI, how organizations do AI. So, and if you look at I was interested in the World Economic Forum. I mean, you can think what they do is good or bad, take a view on that. But it's interesting that they're one of the latest, and I don't know what the data is behind these surveys, but they issued one very recently on the top 10 skills required now, and number 10, squeezing in at the end, was quality. which was interesting. Unfortunately, they didn't dive into too much more detail about that. And looking at skills for the future, you're seeing things like systems thinking being part of that 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 um, that
And
agenda.
And I'm really interested that you've just described that, moving left, as you put it, to build quality in. I've had a fascinating conversation with a senior ops director of a large client of ours just a couple of weeks ago, and he reflected that he was talking about his quality organization, as in the quality function, as it were, within his
Yeah,
business, and the evolution of it. So he's been there long enough that he remembers them, putting in these quality engineers to catch quality problems to stop them impacting the customer. And he really eloquently described to me the journey and the kind of the fog lifting. I think he's from Yorkshire, so he's talking about fog. The fog lifting from his own perception, that it wasn't about inspecting the product at the multiple phases, but actually working out how they could design quality in, and therefore errors out, as it were,
exactly. Yeah,
throughout the process. And he admitted it had taken him years to see. And they'd gone through a process of all the relevant certifications. It was revolutionary to them of introducing inbound goods inspection, in-process inspection, outbound goods inspection, despite all the evidence that it doesn't work over many years. So
well,
it's
I
fascinating to
think
hear
this
you
is a lesson.
describe that too.
Yeah, this is a lesson. I'm not sure. We must be guilty of not communicating, discharging our royal charter effectively enough, if you like. But I think, us more widely as a quality excellence improvement community of not getting this message across. And I also see it in the handoff, in regulatory bodies in this country, because you look at, there was that appalling suicide of that poor head teacher as a result of her Ofsted
Mm-hmm.
inspection. And you look at the Ofsted website, and it says, we exist to inspect quality in, and you think,
Mm.
no, that's not going to work.
Yeah,
That's not
absolutely.
going to work. That's not
And
how life
just
works.
for our listeners, the Ofsted is the UK wide, I believe,
It's
office
England
for
and Wales office.
England and
Yeah,
Wales. That's it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the Inspectorate for Education. It's the regulator of
yeah, for
educational
schools.
bodies
Yeah,
within the UK.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you cannot inspect this in. Well, there explains a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, interesting. So you and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago, Vince, and in that conversation, you've already alluded to some of it. We talked about AI and digital. Um, and I've been reflecting on that, and I wanted to try a couple of things out on you. So since we had our conversation, Vince and I put the world to rights on AI, automation, and all other things in between. Um, one of my reflections is the opportunities that are offered, and I think it has to be about opportunities here for the quality profession to increase the amount of value added time they spend working on processes by capturing the automation to take out the drudgery of some of
Mm, mm,
the
mm.
processes that have been built into the quality profession. And I was thinking particularly about detection, reporting, and eliminating those, a lot of the bureaucracy that can sometimes, unfortunately, be associated with the activity of quality.
Nicely put.
Yeah, I've worked on that one. So, what's your take on that, Vince?
Yeah, I think, well, we've done quite a lot of work on this topic. I know you're talking. We'll come to AI in particular, but about 5 years ago, um, the quality community globally, of course, coined the term quality 4.0 in
Mm-hmm.
the days when, if in doubt, put 4.0 after it, and you sound like you know what you're doing. Um, and so I think the good thing was that what we observed about 7 or 8 years ago when we talked, because we also run a corporate scheme, because we want the voice of industry. And the big challenges that the industry had were skills, and that's absolutely everywhere. Was this idea of getting quality managed in the value chain in the business, so
Mm-hmm.
educating and informing, but also the technology piece. We know it's coming, but we don't know much about it. Um, and So what we've done since there, we've done a little bit of research. We've come up with what we've called quality 4.0 principles, 8 principles. We think a principles-based approach to this, because it is so fast, you can't rules and regulation a lot of this stuff, is the way forwards. So we've come up with a set of principles for thinking about both how quality, how you manage quality in the
Mm-hmm.
digital age,
Mm-hmm.
but also how you use technologies to do quality management better,
Mm-hmm.
more efficiently, more effectively, which is I think what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and we have, we've observed and reported on lots of excellent opportunity. I think you're right. There's lots of good use cases, if you like, lots of good business cases out there. Generally, a lot of them are about saving money, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And perhaps there's something about balancing that with, making sure that, we're delivering superior outcomes. But there's lots of good use cases. And that extends from the sort of industry 4.0 stuff where you can use, we've seen cameras and uh, uh, computers inspecting, if you like, doing 100% inspection of what's
Mm-hmm.
happening on production lines, for example. But more than that, then with the data they have access to, um, understanding what's going wrong. And of course, there's the predictive bit in terms of the modeling that's coming on. So there's lots of good use cases out there. I think, like most professions, the benefit is in um, removing um, removing the need for humans to do um, repetitive work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots, as you say, there's lots of that. I mean, what's the future of audit? You know, what's the future of audit, and how is that going to work? Um, well, I think there's lots of opportunity there, and we're seeing some very interesting experimentation go on all over the world in terms of how organisations are um, approaching sort of quality function activities. Um, I think the interesting thing is that if you end up in any professional domain with the critical things being the human and the creativity piece, um, and you've got fewer people going through the domains, how you train people up and get people, the throughput of people into professional activities. I mean, just look at financial audit, and we had ours recently, and they were proudly showing off you know their data analytics stuff. And you'll get to a point where you don't need to send trainee financial auditors in to
Mm-hmm.
go and collect data. um,
Mm-hmm.
but what's your, is the robot going to manage the audit, the whole thing? I mean,
Yeah.
or will you be stuck for training people up?
Do you think the quality profession is ready for the challenge of things like AI?
um, Not yet, I would say. I
Okay.
would say, um, what I've observed over the past 7 or 8 years since we've been thinking about this is a shift in thinking. Um, so a recognition that this is coming,
Mm-hmm.
that it is of value, and that there is opportunity there. Um, and what we're trying to do, through our content and awards and our groups and things like that, is to move on from the sort of principles and models type thing to the actual use cases and how you do this sort of thing. Because that's really what the community is asking for. Yeah, we get it now. How do we do it? And the other thing we've done, we're releasing next month the next iteration of our competence framework, which will be called our profession map.
Okay.
And we've built into that then the new I don't think it's a complete set by any means, but the new sort of knowledge and skills, competencies, if you like, that quality functions, quality professionals will need in order to be able to um, do both of the things I described before, which is to help build quality in to these systems and tools, if you like, or help others do it, but also to deploy them themselves in terms of their um, how they their own activities. Um, and there's this it was interesting that 6 years ago the debate in certainly in the quality community, will quality professionals need to code? I think we've got over that now.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there's a whole plethora of areas around data analytics, data governance that underpins all this stuff,
Governance, particularly,
particularly
absolutely.
governance, yeah.
Yeah.
um, and an understanding of the use cases, understanding of regulation that's emerging around some
Mm.
of these things. And I think there's also a need to move, to have to be out there in the business, because if you've got organizations who are developing, for example, digital twins on complex systems, they can monitor those complex systems, they can experiment with them. um, you know who is saying, how do we know the digital twin's okay?
Mm-hmm.
We do loads of work on making sure the platform itself's okay. So I think there is the first trick has to be to shift, physically and mindset wise into what's going on in terms of these digital agendas. And it was interesting for me. I was at a quality function meeting. I was invited to it was in a business in the UK, large business in the UK, and the managing director came in. It was about six years ago and said, we're on a digital journey, and we've got a digital team. I don't know what this journey was, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've got a digital team. When I visit all the functions, they've got a sort of group working on digital. But where's quality? Where are you? Um, so I think that mental shift into that space is important. Having the underpinning knowledge and the
Mm-hmm.
confidence to know that we can help you build quality in. We may not understand how it all works.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So I have remembered the thing I'd forgotten. You've
Oh yeah,
mentioned a couple of resources a few times, Vince. I'm right in thinking that listeners can find these on the CQI website.
yeah. Quality.org.
Quality.org.
There
We
you
will
go.
add that to the show notes, folks. So you'll see that in the text under the recording as well. And if anything else comes up during the course of the recording, we will also add useful references to that as well. So, Vince, really exciting. It's the CQI International Quality Awards coming up. Tell us about the awards. What are they? Who are they for?
They're brilliant. Um,
Obs.
they're fun. No, but seriously. I talked about the need for us as a community and the CQI in terms of its purpose is to promote the value of managing quality and the expert enabler, if you like, the quality profession, the quality function. So the awards, the annual awards, are one of the mechanisms we use to do that. And so there's really two key purposes or values in my mind. The first is recognition and celebration, because
Mm,
there are some brilliant people out there and brilliant teams doing absolutely brilliant work, and bringing that to life and celebrating that, I think, is important, um, um, because you know I think it's important that the quality profession gets up in the morning and thinks not, today I'm going to, do an audit or, polish up that 9001. But, what I'm going to do is to help this great organization I work for do even better.
yeah.
And I think we need to we need to keep that message going and keep people, really motivated for what they can do and what the profession does. So that's the first thing. Second thing is really to flush out good and emergent practice.
Yeah.
So that is uh, uh, we do that through our quality team of the year and the quality organization of the year. But also we have some sort of some two topic-based awards, one on digital and one on sustainability. From that, we're developing what I hope are useful for the profession, but also for organisations generally, insights into both good practice and also some exciting emerging practice as well.
So, without revealing too much then on these insights, any emerging trends from this year's entries?
Well, that's a very difficult question because I'm likely to do a blooper. Um, um, can I answer that question sort of more generally over the past few years?
Yes,
Is that okay?
absolutely.
So I think what if you were going to write that book on what makes an excellent organisation and base it on these, then I think those organisations which are really making good progress and performing well, they are the ones. There's plenty of examples of this who see the whole organisation focused around creating and improving value. Those organisations that are purpose driven, that see quality as more than simply what it used to be, but the people and planet side of things. So I think there's some good lessons to be learned from those in terms of what makes a quality organisation, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing some really innovative digital stuff going on, both in terms of how organisations do quality assurance, for example, and even to the extent that some of our instruments, in fact, some of our members are creating patents on new technologies and products to help them do this sort of stuff.
Wow.
I think so. I'm very encouraged by that, and I hope they serve as some inspiration and usefulness for others. The sustainability one's interesting. The most of the discussion, if you like, and the case studies that we see are about sort of policy deployment through the system,
Mm-hmm.
how we manage ESG and all that sort of stuff. I think there is what I've yet to see is how organisations are going to respond to things like the European Union circular economy piece, which is really about how you I can never remember what the 4 R's are. Recycle, reuse, repair, and re something else. But that means, in terms of again shifting left, how you design products and processes to make that meaningful step change into those sorts of and of course there's a lot of quality in that, both in terms of quality planning,
Yeah,
reliability.
absolutely.
Engineering becomes a competitive advantage, of course, if you're not allowed to sell something that only lasts a year.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of work yet to be done in that area. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And so, anyone listening to this after the awards, they are an annual event, as Vince has pointed out. So, do check out the CQI website, quality.org, as Vince mentioned, also in the show notes, for details of the categories that evolve every year. Some core ones in there, but keeping up with what's happening, they do change. And take a look and see if there's opportunities for celebrating your work in the profession.
That thanks for the plug, Rich. And I
You're
think
very welcome.
there's a we've had one of your clients actually. In fact, Jade Wilcox is going to be speaking at our conference on the same day.
Ah, yes, of course. Yeah.
So I think there is what's interesting for me as well is you often find a quality function in a big business, where there's lots of regulation and
Mm.
complex value chains and supply chains and so on to manage. But I think where you won't find the quality function and the quality profession per se is in the SME.
Hmm.
And I think bringing to life how smaller or medium-sized organizations can approach this topic and win huge competitive advantage, as your client did, I think it shows that it is developing quality, culture, and capability is very achievable, whatever size you are.
I want to pick up a few things about your perspective on leadership, both within the quality sector, but also thinking about you as yourself. So, thinking about your own professional journey, what have been some of the key influences and experiences that have shaped the way you lead in the sector and within your organisation?
Yeah. Well, I won't mention any names, but there's a lot of people I've learned what not to do from. Um, excuse me. I suppose you'll find this a little bit boring, but I sort of bring it back to quality in a sense. For me, it's been those, what I've learned from people and leaders is around leaning into customers. I think that's that has been very instructive. Because for obvious reasons, I suppose. Leaning into people because they're despite all this technology stuff, organizations are still human endeavors that are meant to create value for humanity. Leaning into the system of work, I think they're, if I sort of bring this back to those sorts of quality principles, and when you observe people who are really good at that, and especially leaders that make time for that, I think that's been that has been very useful, and equally those that don't has also been very useful as well.
So let's switch then here, Vince. Let's think about another angle. Other leaders you admire, and why?
And why? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. One very recently, I was at the BSI annual general meeting last week. An annual general meeting can be terribly turgid. Here's our financial results, here's our auditors, all that sort of stuff. But the chief executive, Susan Taylor Martin, was those moments when you write stuff down and say, oh, yeah, there's a takeaway for me here. And she did an absolutely brilliant job because she told a story about what those numbers mean in terms of, and this is what our people do, and this is why UK benefits from this. So it goes back to the purpose bit. So that's my most recent one. The other people I derive inspiration from, especially in a VUCA world, as they call it, and a world where there is a lot of opinion, and a world where we can tend to retreat into flat out argument and not listening. People like Professor Jordan Peterson, I admire for his first of all his data, his data-based approach to some of these very divisive and complex topics, and his approach of, again, leaning in and saying, no, you need to help me understand because this is my view. I think that we need more people like that in our society who are going to lean in and say, okay, let's talk about this stuff because I don't agree with you, and that's fine. And that's fine. But we're going to have to work some of these complex problems out. We've got some massively complex problems in the world at the moment, as well as in our organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, really interesting. So, Vince, final question for you. I know you well enough to know that you don't like providing advice to others. But what about yourself? What key advice would you give yourself earlier in your career, other than the bank manager and the jazz career?
Yeah. Get a different bank manager, I think. Choose your bank managers carefully. I think so I did think about this because you did tell me you're going to pose this one. And a couple of things. First is trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about data just now, making informed decisions. But I think the subconscious is a funny little thing. And when you've got, you get that feeling, think there's something not right here, or I think this is a good idea, but I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So chase down your gut instinct, because I think if you don't, there's usually something there. So that would be the first thing. Second thing for me is build a network.
Mm-hmm.
I think having a network of people in the organization, outside the organization, in the environment is invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
Especially especially when your gut is telling you something and you need to pick the phone up. So that would be the second thing. The third thing would be I have learned, and you probably tell this from the conversation, it is lean in.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a problem, lean into it, because there's going to be something there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's and the final thing for me is you know work, especially if you get up in the morning and think that, I'm going to make the world better. I'm going to make people's lives better today, can be all consuming. And it is very easy to not balance that with the joy, pleasure, responsibilities, duties that come from your friends and family.
Agree. Here. Fantastic. Thanks, Vince. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to those. And really, really interested about the trust your gut. And one thing I'd usually add to that is try and disprove your own theories, but ultimately trust your gut.
well, yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
really
Good
interesting.
point.
So, Vince, fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Leading for Business Excellence. As I mentioned earlier on, folks, you'll find some useful references in the show notes where you can find the links, etc., to some of the things that we've talked about today, as well as some of the key points that Vince has described. Don't forget the CQI's International Quality Awards. I very much suspect we're going live this in the week of the awards themselves.
Excellent.
So even better. So Vince, thanks again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, it's been a blast.